Those are my boys, and so every week we have a different father-son combo who's building our stop motion for this series, and so I set him up and I kind of got him going in the right direction, and then I came back down and they're doing some crazy stuff that had nothing to do with this, and they had one little scene where this little tiny Lego comes in and he jumps on top of the weed, and the weed spins around and throws him off, and he like lands lands on the ground, and it didn't make the final cut. So, but I loved it. They did that. It was awesome. All right. Hey, really quickly, I want to celebrate our SPF 50, our 50 and older group. They did something super awesome. The Interfaith Sanctuary downtown Boise needed a lot of stuff, a big list, and they put together 2 tables worth of listed items and took them down. They're going to go to literally help those who just need a lot of extra help. So this happened about a week and a half ago. And I just thought we'd celebrate that. Isn't that awesome that they did that? Yeah. They say churches begin to grow and become fruitful when the people who aren't being paid by the church begin to reach out and do great ministry. And this is just an example of that wasn't organized or set up by any of the staff. It's just something that they felt like they needed to do, and they did it in the name of Jesus. It's incredible. So, if you were to become a Christian as an adult, the greatest challenge that you will face is trying to change your influences. Because you will have spent most of your life being influenced by what you watch and what you listen to, and maybe more importantly, who you hang out with. And the concept of getting rid of those worldly influences and replacing them with godly influences is so incredibly challenging. It would be the same as those of us who are adults trying to change the way we eat after 30 or 40 years of eating the same way, trying to radically change that. It can become really, really tough. In order for you to make those changes, it will take sometimes months, if not years, especially the friendship part of it. There's a verse I love. It says 5 words: bad company corrupts good character. And so we find Christ, but changing those influence, man, it just takes a little bit of time. So a month goes by, maybe a year goes by, and you make those changes. And now you're surrounded by good people, and you're listening to good things, and you're watching things that edify the spirit and help you feel good about God and who He is. And then step 2 becomes this now that all these positive influences are affecting our hearts, now we have this desire. It's always kind of been there, but it's been buried underneath what we watch and listen to and who we hang out with. But then we have this shift in our heart, and there is a desire that comes to the surface that we want to serve the kingdom. It's like the blinders have come off, and suddenly we realize and we see that God is at work all around us. And step 2, if you want to look at it that way, is really now we want to be involved in what God is doing. Now we want to teach a Sunday school class or host a small group. Now we want to preach in some way or help in some way or help out in a children's classroom. We have this desire that we want to be a part of what God is doing. I just want to be on the bus wherever God is heading. I just want to be a part of that. Now, you can't get there until you change your influences. And then step 2 is now you want to be a part of what God is doing, part of this kingdom. I have heard in my lifetime countless numbers of people who go on mission trips, adults, young adults, because they want to be a part of the kingdom, and they come back changed. They're different. Who they are is different. So we start by changing our influences, and then we get involved in church, then we're serving, we're doing something God has called us to do. Then step 3. Step 3 is now we're considering allowing God into our finances. Man, this is tough. Right? It's tough to say, I'm going to allow God into my finances. But if you follow our trail that we're on, this makes sense, because first we get rid of our bad influences and God grows our hearts, and now we want to be a part of what God is doing. And then once you're a part of what God is doing, you begin to understand that finances are important, that they help the church go forward. They help the church do good things. They help missionaries do good things. And so now your heart is moved in that direction, and now you're considering maybe, just maybe, can I take that third step and allow God into my finances? This is awkward. We're going to talk about it in this sermon. It's awkward to take a paycheck, if you've never done this, and say, God, I'm going to help you. I'm going to allow you to help me make decisions on where this money goes. That just feels like really weird and foreign, but we're going to talk about that today. There is a fourth step. We won't talk about it today, but if you get past that, then you have that next step to where you just begin to live out loud, because everything else is right. And you begin to live your faith out loud, and you share your faith consistently and constantly. It's just, you become a different person, maybe even consider full-time ministry. But I believe they go in order. So a lot of us here have conquered one, and maybe some of us have conquered two. But if we were to be realistic, statistics tell us that 80 to 85% of us, 80 to 85% of us will never conquer step 3. We will never trust God with our finances. I found some stats that I think are worth mentioning here. This was a study in 2013 called State of the Plate. You got to love that, State of the Plate. This was sponsored by Christianity Today and some other organizations. It said, of the people who give, who we don't preach tithing here, we preach generosity. If you grew up under tithing, that's awesome. My wife and I still use the word tithing because we tithe, but we don't look at it that way. For the rest of us, we teach here generosity. Give what God has called you to give. But here, get this. Once we cross this line, influences go away, we're serving the kingdom, now we're trusting God with our finances. Once we begin to trust God with our finances, what you will find, this is a crazy stat, most people don't give 10%. Most people give more than 10%. It's like once we've crossed that line, we say, okay, God, you're welcome into my finances. Then our hearts are changed the same way our hearts were changed when we jumped into ministry. It's like everything shifts, and now this desire to give him more and to trust him with our finances begins to spring up in us and grow in us. Listen to this. Of the people who tithe, only 23% give 10%. I know that some of us in here, we get $800, we give the church $80, and awesome. If that's what you're doing, that's what God's called you to do, have at it. But listen to this. 77% of what we're calling tithers, 77% of tithers give more than 10%. 54% will give between 11 and 15%. 14% will give 16 to 20%. And almost 10% will give 20% or more. What's important to me there is kind of once we've crossed that line, then God opens up this generosity. And it starts out with just a little, we're doing something, like we're doing just a little something, and then God begins to grow in us. And this desire to be generous grows. The New Testament verse that is most often used for churches like us who believe in generosity comes from 2 Corinthians 9:7. It says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give. Not reluctantly, not like, well, I guess I've got to. What's exactly 10% of $427? And, it's not reluctantly or under compulsion, not because you have to. It says God loves or greatly enjoys a cheerful giver. that our hearts are in it. We're excited to give, and it doesn't matter where it's going. It doesn't matter if we're supporting missions or our next door neighbors. There's just something about that generosity that springs up in us that is so great. Proverbs 11:24 says this: some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due, a tithe or a tax, and only suffer want. A generous person will be enriched, and the one who gives water will get water. Jesus said something similar in the book of Luke. This is him speaking. This is coming right after he talks about forgiveness and a few other things where if you offer forgiveness, you'll be given forgiveness. And then he takes those same principles and he uses it for giving. He says this: give and it will be given to you. This is Jesus talking. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. If you're listening today and your instant reaction is, I'm being manipulated, or Dusty's trying to make me give more money to the church, or whatever. We all have those little lies that pop in our head. Let me encourage you, go give somewhere else. Don't let me stop you from chasing after Jesus. Go find somewhere that you believe in wholeheartedly and begin to involve God in your finances and see what he does. This is him speaking. That's not me. That's God. Jesus saying, listen, man, give and it will be given to you. God will take care of his kids. There's a few things I believe keep us from giving. I want to talk about a big one. And then I got some really good news I'm going to share about the building, and then we're going to close with a few tangible things we can all do. One of the other lies that sometimes pops in our head is that look what I've done. Like, I've worked so hard, and I've put out the work for this. I've used my brain. I've used my hours, my time, whatever. And I don't want to share it. It's mine. Like, I have earned it. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was a few things that I saved up to buy with my own money, right? And I was so excited. I remember going to the mall and buying a video game called Blades of Steel for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yes. What made this game so great, it was a hockey game, but you could fight. And so you got to fight somebody, and that was awesome when video games first came out. And it was pixelated, just a couple of guys who would kind of do this, but we were so excited. And so $49.95 plus tax, I bought this game. And there was a pride, like an excitement that, man, I did this. Like, I made this happen. Maybe you've been there too. And maybe even if your parents were like mine, when I would buy things with my own money, my mom would celebrate that. Dusty, great job. I'm so proud of you for saving your money and buying something. You know, she would say these things, and I felt good, and I think she was proud of me. It wasn't until I became a parent that I realized the truth of what was happening. Now, my kids do the same thing. They save their money and they buy things, and we celebrate that. They did that. My son Daxton saved $2,000 over 2 years to go on a trip out to Washington, D.C. with his school. $2,000, that's real money. It took a long time. It took 2 years of him saving every dollar, and he didn't spend anything, and we're super proud of him. And so maybe your kids have done this. They've saved their money, but get this. If your kid saves his money and he buys a new pair of shoes or a new game or whatever, and you go, awesome job, True, awesome job. He was able to do that because you are paying his mortgage, because you are paying for all his food and insurance and dental bills and braces, because you pay for everything, and then he's proud, she's proud for saving $50 and buying Blades of Steel. Sometimes I feel like in our finances, we treat God this way. Look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. And I don't think God sees it that way at all. He says, no, I've allowed that to happen for you. This is a great verse. I don't have time to read the whole thing, but I want to get into a little bit of it. Listen, this is 2 Corinthians, this is Deuteronomy 8, starting in verse 10. This is the Israelites after coming out of the desert, and God took care of them in the desert, and now they're getting into the promised land, and things are starting to look really good. God says, when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God. Praise him for the good land he has given you. He gives a couple of warnings. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. This warning comes right after, hey, when things are awesome, when you're truly blessed, don't forget God, America. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. I did this. Look at what I accomplished. Team, church, when we follow that lie and we begin to think that it's something that we have done, that pride, man, there's a fall coming because it is totally God. These next couple of verses, he's just talking about, he gave you man in the wilderness, something your ancestors never known, to humble and test you so in the end you might go well with you. He led you through the vast and dreadful wilderness and thirsty, waterless land. It's venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought water out of a hard rock. We are going backwards. That is odd. Please hold. I have a backup plan. Look at verse 17. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. Verse 18, this is the crux. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. I believe every good gift comes from God. When you think in your journey about who it is that has really meant something to you, who's poured into your life, almost without exception, everybody thinks of somebody generous. Somebody who's just generous, not just with money, but with their time and their talent. They just seem to give freely. And that's incredible. It's attractive. We want that, but we're not willing to actually invite God into our finances. My wife and I have always done this. I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but I'm saying we really make this a priority in our journey. And I can tell you that I've seen God's hand move. There's something about inviting God into your finances that just changes the way all your money is spent, that changes where your money goes and how far it goes and those sort of things. It just changes because I've invited God into the middle of that. Man, I hope there would be a few of us that would get past that step 2 and get into step 3 where we begin to let God rule in our finances the way he rules in other areas of our life. We did a survey at the beginning of this year, and we asked what percentage of our people give 10% or more how many of us give occasionally and how many of us don't give. And we kind of made a joke like, we only come to this church because you never talk about money, which is true. We don't talk about it often. But the stats said that 40% of us are giving at least 10%. We know that's not completely accurate. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying someone around you probably did. Because we don't see those numbers in the giving here at Revive. Our best guess is we're part of the national average where 20% of us give about 80% of the finances here at this church. But I'm telling you, God can do things even in your finances if you're willing to put him first and allow him to have his way. You never know what he's going to do. I've seen God's hand move in some miraculous ways. Let me share with you one of those miraculous ways. When we went to get a loan for this new building, if you're visiting with us, we just bought a new building. We're hoping it funds by the end of the month and we get to move in. So we're super excited. God is moving, yes. So we went to get a loan. We looked at 3 or 4 options. Some of them were like huge down payment. Like one of them had closing cost of $30,000. That was ridiculous. Not ridiculous. I'm sure they're doing good stuff. But anyway, that seemed like a lot for us. Didn't mean to throw them under the bus. But we were looking at all sorts of different things. We had 4 people that are on a finance committee who did an awesome job going through loans. And we found an incredible loan. And I mentioned this maybe 2 weeks ago. It was about 5% down. 5% is a 5% rate if you're a financial person. 20-year fixed, which never happens on commercial. If you know anything about commercial real estate, it's typically 5 years, 3 years. It's adjustable. So 20-year fixed. There was just everything. We liked almost everything about this loan. We had to bring 15% to the table, but that was way better than 25%. So it gave us a little bit extra money to keep with us to kind of put down carpet for children's ministry and parking and all that stuff. The only downside to the loan was it had a pretty heavy prepayment penalty. That's how they get you 20-year fixed, is like you can't prepay, so you're kind of stuck for 20 years. But we were super thankful. This was way better, and it was awesome. A week and a half ago, our youth pastor who led worship today, Josh and I, we were over at a conference in Seattle. It's becoming a long story. I'm sorry. Follow with me. We go walking in, and Josh and I are leading worship that morning, so we're excited about that. We get there early. I shake hands with this guy who knew we were trying to get a loan. He runs a Christian organization that mostly do smaller loans of about 500 and less. And so Carter says, hey, man, how's the loan going? I said, Carter, you're not going to believe this, man. We got 4.93% fixed for 20 years with 15% down. I said, we are ecstatic. That was way better than we expected. We thought we were going to empty out the account just to get in the door. Carter says, okay. He says, what if I could give you the same loan with no money down? I looked at Josh. I was like, you got my attention, Carter. Let's talk about that. It just so happens at the same conference, he had 3 members of his board. He leads the board, but obviously he can't make this decision on his own. So they got together and they talked. And then Carter says, can I see your loan from the bank you're borrowing from, like the commitment letter? I said, absolutely. We've been texting back and forth, so I send it. He calls me. He doesn't normally call. We text. He calls. He goes, Dusty, you're getting 20-year fixed on commercial. I said, I told you. He goes, I know you told me, but I didn't believe you. I was like, we're getting 20-year fixed. He said, we've never done a 20-year loan. We typically do 5. Sometimes we do 10. I said, Carter, if we can't do 20, we're probably not interested. We like the 20-year fix because this makes sense for us going forward. He says, let me get back to you. And he called back. And so, get this, 20-year fixed, 30-year amortized, but we can pay it off as soon as we want. So we can pay it off early. There's 0 prepayment penalty. And we get to keep all our money in the bank to do the financial stuff that we need to do ASAP. And because it's 30-year amortized, the payment is going to be the exact same as it would have been, give or take, as the other loan. And we can pay it off early. Again, We walked into that meeting not thinking about that at all. We were done. We had signed the paperwork. We were moving forward with the loan, and I felt like God said, I'm not done yet. There's more. We continue to see God's hand move in amazing ways. I believe the church is us. It's me and you. But I just feel like this building is important to God, that he's going to use this to do great things beyond us. To those apartments that are all around it, he's going to do some amazing ministry, and we're excited to be a part of it. When you put God first in your finances, don't be shocked when he shows up in crazy ways. And when he does, or crazy opportunities, and when those show up, make sure he gets the glory and the honor. Let me close with just these 3 final steps really quickly. Number 1 is the toughest one, inviting God into your finances. Because for so long, we have treated finances as something secular, and God as something spiritual. And those 2 things coming together always feels weird. Because we're taking the greediness and the selfishness of finances that we all have, it's all in there, a little bit or a lot, it's in there. And we're trying to push those out, and we're trying to bring the Spirit of God into our finances. I'm inviting you to do that. On a very practical level, that can mean the next time you get a paycheck that you just spend 5 minutes in prayer. God, and you can say, God, I am thankful for the opportunity to make this money. I'm thankful for the opportunity to work. I'm thankful I have a job. I owe you the credit. And then you say, God, how can we leverage this for the kingdom? And allow God to move in your finances. So number 1, invite God into your finances. Number 2, Old Testament, New Testament, I think they differ a little bit on generosity versus tithing, but I still believe wholeheartedly in first fruits. This means that God goes first in our finances. If you are considering giving God 10% at the end of the month or 3% first fruits, I would recommend you give 3% first fruits. There's something about putting God first. My wife and I, we chase after this. We do this. When she gets paid or I get paid, I usually get a text, and she'll say, what do you want to do as far as giving this month? And she asks that because we give to some different things. In the summer, we stop giving to our legacy, and we give to the church because, we need more giving. And we just, it varies a little bit on how we give. So she'll always ask, and that's always the first discussion we have is, what do we want to do with this? And so I invite you to make that the number 1 priority when you financially, number 1 priority. And then number 3, I just put, give joyfully. Give joyfully. I mean, when you give, man, may it be exciting, not under compulsion, not because you have to, but you're excited about what God is going to do. Man, I invite some more of us to get past that step 2 and get into step 3. I get it. Statistically, 85% of us are never going to get there. But if you feel stuck in your spiritual journey, this might be the next big step for you. You've just never trusted God in your finances. So bring him in. Think about it. Talk to him about it. Paul says, decide in your heart what you're going to give. And we've had people here that I've chatted with, and they're like, man, I'm giving 1%, or I'm giving 2%, or I'm giving 3%. And I'm excited about that. Really, I'm stoked because now at least you're bringing God into your finances. And then as you grow in that, as you start with that, you'll find, like I shared the statistics earlier, that you want to give more. There's an excitement to giving to what God is doing. In our country, finances are an idol. They are absolutely an idol, and we worship it. If you worship money, you will never have enough of it. You will never be satisfied. It's time that we shifted our thinking and realize that everything we have is God's anyway, and he has created an opportunity for us to make money, to find money, to save money. He has created those opportunities for us. Let us begin as a church to put God first. If we were all to buy in on this, imagine the ministry that Revive could do. There's a stat years ago that came out. Because so few people, again, it's only 15% or so of people give 10% or more. They said if everybody in the church went on welfare and tithe 10%, the church would have more money than they knew what to do with. The truth is, in a church our size, there's a handful of people, you know who you are, that support this ministry, that make it go. And I'm asking all of us to do our part. I'm not asking for a bit. We've already taken the offering today, so I'm not trying to manipulate into giving some big check today. I'm asking for you to really consider a life change. Then on the next payday you go, all right, God, I'm bringing you in on this. What does this look like? What do we do with this? How do we leverage it for your kingdom and for your glory, and allow God to speak